And we're live. Welcome back, everybody. Dipcatcher Radio back again. What a beautiful Friday. It's a Friday once again. Oh, there's the Twitter or the YouTube notification. So looks like we're live. Let me go ahead and repost the link so that we can get cracking. Six viewers on YouTube, 13 on Twitter. Let's see what the comments are. Dipster, you ready for all the boxing this weekend? I wasn't aware. Tons of great fights starting tonight. Yeah, I was not aware. I don't really watch boxing unless if it's like kind of those big mainstream kind of things that you get suckered into, like the Jake Paul stuff, and I'll watch more MMA if I care about. Like, there's a handful of people in the UFC that I just like personally. So sometimes I'll watch those. I've gone to a movie theater by myself to watch a UFC stream there, because sometimes in movie theaters they have it playing. And yeah. Alex Willis of Strength and Honor, that's right. Good catcher. Yeah, CFC's my jam. Yeah, me too. I mean, I've been on like the Sean Strickland bandwagon for years now. I like Sean O'Malley. I like Patty Pimblett. Yeah. So kind of probably just ones that YouTube recommends, honestly, are the people that I tend to like. And Top says, "What's up, Hexagons? How's it going?" So let's kick this off. I mean, really more of the same. It's time to drive a new era for HEX, simply. We've kind of, had 2 years to experience kind of like what the pulse chain vision was for HEX, and basically just been getting our ass kicked for 2 years. So I don't think that pulse chain is the key to unlocking anything in HEX, where it's actually the opposite. I think the only thing that can unlock anything for pulse chain is a successful HEX. HEX is the oldest one. It's the only really differentiated coin in the ecosystem. Like, HEX is a purely original thing that actually kicked off a number of different industries within DeFi. So it's really a leader and innovator in that, whereas like Pulse, PulseX, and Ink are literal copies of things that were successful last cycle. So I don't think that a bright future for HEX comes from Pulse Chain. It's kind of the opposite, where a bright future for Pulse Chain actually comes from a successful HEX. So kind of the root of the problem that we're trying to solve here is that that HEX, because it's kind of, like, there's been such the focus on Pulse Chain that it's been kind of isolated from all this other innovation that's happened in Ethereum. And it's artificially low. So to solve that, we are going to be integrating HEX as a gas fee token for a new layer 2 blockchain called flexnet. So Over 40 Leaning Up asks what flexnet is. Can you talk about it for a bit? Yes. Welcome to the video. So flexnet is a layer 2 blockchain that uses HEX as the gas token and HEX as the primary liquidity route for all coins and all protocols that live on FlexNet. It's based on the Arbitrum L2 stack, and it leverages a lot of the innovation that's taken place over the last really 4 years towards this L2 as a scaling model roadmap. There's been billions of dollars of infrastructure development with, along the lines of cross-chain interoperability, bridging, the different scaling models and different security models around these L2s. And so by now there's been billions of dollars of business secured on chain, to where these things are a little bit more mature now, so they're now reliable to really leverage in this way. So that's simply kind of what it is. Blockchains are kind of a dime a dozen now. Like, every chain is fast and cheap. So that's really not the core value proposition of this. The core value proposition, one, comes down to really just the culture that we're creating around FlexNet, where it's really a culture of innovation. There's been a pretty strong culture of stagnation over the last couple of years in this ecosystem, and a culture really centered around copies and forks. And while it's good to copy what works, like that's a really solid strategy in general. If you're trying to have true breakout success, especially in an industry like crypto, where every so often major breakthroughs happen and major new things are a thing that take over. It's kind of what HEX was, truly. I think we just need to restore that culture in order to unlock what is next, and make it where HEX is part of that. Because right now, really since Pulse launch, HEX has kind of been out of discussion. And so through FlexNet, we're really trying to create a culture of innovation to reinsert HEX into the discussion, boost its credibility, unlock new use cases, unlock new sources of demand, and really restore it to its proper glory. It really had glory in 2021, and it really had a strong culture of innovation, I'd say, in 2022, but 2023 and 2024, and even thus far, halfway through 2025, it's not been that way. So that's what we're solving with FlexNet, and we're pushing forward. So kind of the other thing that differentiates FlexNet is its relationship with HEX. Using HEX as a gas token, compared to kind of most L2s just use Ethereum as their token. And so it's kind of like an extension on the mainnet. There are a lot of other L2s will launch a new token that will, mainly a fundraising vehicle. And then some L2s are using custom gas token functionality. I think HEX as a custom gas token, it has a lot of benefits, which I'll actually pull up the site and we can actually walk through these benefits right here. So let me share my screen, and then we will talk about why HEX is really core to this, and why HEX, if you're a crypto builder, why you may want to give HEX a second thought, as it's kind of the core of FlexNet, and really this really, to me, is the bull case for HEX, and a growing having the gas token for the network be a coin that has its own independent value. That covers a lot of just the challenge of just bootstrapping a new economy around a new coin, but also it has an active community with this big network effect. So there's a couple passionate community, over 100,000 members united around blockchain innovation and yield generating assets. So that's already if you're building stuff on chain, you want to ship to a network where there are going to be people that care. And so having a chain where over 100,000 people can just easily bridge in with assets they already have, that's an immediate network effect that other developers who are interested in the L2 space can tap into, and we can kind of reach those people in a new way. It's not kind of tied into kind of all the bullshit of the past related to HEX. We can really reach people kind of in a new light if we kind of come where they are. So here, HEX has been at the forefront of decentralized finance innovation since 2019. It was the category creator of the yield generating asset space in DeFi. It was one of the first major use cases of Uniswap, helping to popularize decentralized exchanges. It was one of the top performing assets of the 2021 crypto market cycle. And a massive community was formed centered around delayed gratification and long-term value creation. So those are pretty, like HEX, the Hexicans specifically have been at the forefront of this. And so that's just like a powerful group in general to, give these tools to. And a powerful group that you as a developer would want to have access to. So that's really important. A couple core principles: long-term vision. Members value patience and delayed gratification, focusing on sustainable growth. Community engagement. There's active participation in content creation, meetups, and ecosystem projects. Huge educational focus. People love learning and teaching others about blockchain stuff, token stuff, game theory, etc. And there's global reach. 6 continents, dozens of countries. Truly, it's an international thing. Like, this isn't like a local, like San Francisco tech bro thing or like a local New York finance bro thing. Very diverse group. A lot more women than in other ecosystems. I always joke that in crypto, it's about 98% male and 2% female. In HEX, it's probably 92% male and 8% female, which is pretty substantial. And so, there's real synergy that's kind of, by FlexNet really leaning into HEX here in this way. There's immediate network effect from the existing community of over 100,000 members, long-term alignment of interests with a community that values delayed gratification, technical understanding from a community that already understands complex blockchain and multi-chain systems, and the direct value transfer due to the mechanism where you mint Flex, which Flex is the gas token, but it's one-to-one wrapped HEX. So in effect, HEX is the gas token, but it just has to be wrapped to make it compatible to be used as a gas token. So just like that direct value transfer through the one-to-one, always mintable, always redeemable model helps to, kind of cement that. And so there's also a couple reasons here why HEX, other than, already a popular token. Of all the coins in the ecosystem, it really is the one that has the most growth potential, because it's been so resilient for so long. It's basically at like mid 2020 prices. So kind of that final leg of the bull run, it's retraced, but it's kind of right in the middle if you look at it on the log scale. And so between that and then some of the tailwinds that are there with Ethereum, like some of the big Ethereum upgrades that have gone on and are going to be rolled out this year, I think Ethereum is going to kind of have another cycle. Ethereum itself is undervalued. And of all the coins in the ecosystem, it's the only one that doesn't have like massive overhead resistance, because all of the top buyers in HEX were basically the sacrificers. And so now that top buyer energy, which would normally show up as resistance on the HEX chart, that now shows up in the Pulse and Pulse X charts. So it's like alleviated itself of its overhead resistance. It's had full market cycle reset. It's had a full markup, distribution, markdown, and accumulation cycle so far. And so, and it's, was tried to be done away with by the creator of it. Like all these other factors that like why HEX is kind of the one that's like undervalued right now. It's artificially low. And what happens when things are artificially low is that actually gives things energy to the upside. Bitcoin was artificially low in 2018 as a result of a big Ponzi scheme that unwinded, and the result was a bunch of Bitcoin being sold on top of some aftermath effects of the Bitcoin block wars, large blocks versus small blocks, and the miners, like all this stuff was going on. So there's like a time period where it was artificially low, and that kind of gave it the energy to go quite high. Solana is a more recent example where in 2022 it was artificially low due to its involvement with FTX and just kind of being highly affected by that. So it was artificially low, but then kind of as that got resolved and the world kind of moved on and the existing players kind of doubled down on Solana, it gave it a bunch of energy to the upside. And so HEX right now is, it has that kind of artificially low current state, which gives it energy to the upside as soon as there's like a new source of demand. And that's what FlexNet really is designed to do, is to really drive a culture of innovation, bring new use cases to HEX, and new sources of demand that isn't just Richard buying back tokens and isn't just like the same community members just like rotating from thing to thing. And there have been a couple of recent events that have actually driven that even further put HEX in a position to have a successful cycle if a new source of demand comes. One of which is the inflation rate being drastically cut on HEX on Ethereum. In the past, it was actually kind of difficult to build on top of HEX or build things, because if you're measuring your performance in HEX, then it was very hard to beat just like the normal staking yield. If you factor in the dollars, then it's actually been quite easy to overperform HEX. But now that the stake yield is much lower, not only is just like the inflation drastically reduced, it's like the equivalent of a Bitcoin halving happening suddenly a couple weeks ago. And it has lasting effect because the real culprits in the hyperinflation of HEX that we've kind of been living through the last couple of years are the stakes that were made before Big Payday, due to a nuance in how the share rate ratcheted up and due to the Big Payday payment itself. And so I think Richard was aware. I was voicing this problem for a long time, but I think he was probably independently aware of that problem created by Big Payday. And it was resolved by the staking activity, which more accurately reflected the normal market staking balances. So those, so that really makes it so that like now more than ever is a time to build on HEX, because we went from a time of artificially high yield to now a more accurate, more realistic yield situation. And so whenever rates go down, like, when the federal government or the Federal Reserve reduces rates, that unlocks innovation because it incentivizes people who would otherwise be parking funds in treasuries to instead invest in businesses and innovation. And that's when we see big, a lot of speculation take place. And so now that the HEX rates are slashed, it really primes the market for big innovations around HEX, which maybe in the past were kind of priced out due to the artificially high yield. So overall, this is a really powerful asset that FlexNet is harnessing, and this is a real growth solution, a real solution to try to drive something in the ecosystem. I think there's kind of like people have kind of just decided that they're fine with just rotating from thing to thing within Pulse Chain and just waiting for Richard to pump the bags so they can sell. And that's not enough for me, and that shouldn't be enough for you. There's endless opportunity available, and you really got to focus on the things that are high leverage, things that can actually impact, make an impact, and that is HEX on Ethereum. So that is what FlexNet is, the first HEX-powered blockchain, really leaning into a lot of the infrastructure that's been built in this L2 space. Like, that's the thing, is like Pulse Chain is about 2 years behind Ethereum upgrades. No one knows why. And also, so a lot of the upgrades really don't even, maybe this is why, now that I think about it. A lot of the upgrades really are centered around L2s. Like they'll roll things out which are enablers to the L2 model. And since L2s don't even really exist, and maybe they can't even exist on Pulse Chain, That may contribute to it. Also, a lot of the recent upgrades have been centered around changes to the validator system. And so I know that there were changes made to the validator system. So the consensus layer is what they call it. They were done when Pulse launched, which may make them incompatible with updates made more recently. I haven't looked at the code or really gotten deep in that set of weeds to try to unpack why, but there may not be it may be impossible to include the things that are rolled out in these major upgrades. Some things possibly can, especially things that are more like contract specifications or things like that, but things that are more like network oriented, those may not be able to be rolled out despite what has been suggested in the past. So they're not implementing the Ethereum upgrades, but also people ask why don't they just create their own upgrades? No, maybe there's work that's not on public GitHub accounts or GitLab accounts, but it takes a really particular type of qualification to be able to actually make real substantial upgrades to a blockchain network. If you look at the people who are writing the pull requests for, they get actually merged into Ethereum mainnet. Those are serious professional researchers in the space, and there's hundreds of them, and so the rate at which innovation can take place is just a lot greater there. Whereas there's really been nothing happening to the network, which in some respects is fine. Bitcoin, stuff happens on Bitcoin, but very rarely are there big sweeping changes, and they really push back against changes. And part of that is because I think proof of work blockchains kind of lean more into that, but proof of stake, I think, is a little bit different of a situation. And then also the blockchain space for Bitcoin as a blockchain, it's really centered around BTC, the asset, whereas Ethereum and Solana and these other ones, they're really centered around the things that are built on top of it. And that in general is a setting where there's kind of never an end state where things are always improving and kind of responding to the market demands and the developer demands. So for a blockchain that's trying to be competitive in the business of selling block space, staying up to date with the state-of-the-art stuff is kind of important. So there's been all this progress on Ethereum, but it just hasn't kept up in Pulse chain. So really leveraging that for the sake of HEX, it's kind of a clear solution. So that's kind of why while the rest of the ecosystem I think is pretty at least the vocal people, they'll basically just do whatever Richard says. They don't necessarily have particularly strong agency, and also fairly limited skill set to where they could actually take action. But the really smart and talented people that I talk to in the space, they fully understand why this is the clear-cut solution for HEX. And so I think over time, especially as it gets real, the testnet's launching on Monday, mainnet will probably launch in the next couple of weeks or months. And every day that it gets more and more real, I think people will kind of come more around to it. And I think once you see the results of new demand sources for HEX, new sinks on the HEX supply, then I think that they'll be a little bit more receptive. But we build for the people who are on the cutting edge, not the late mover, low information user. We really need to break through, and I don't think a big breakthrough comes from catering to the lowest common denominator user. We're really building for the people that are really serious about the future of HEX. And so that's what this really is all about. And then the late movers, they'll move late. So that's not who you cater to immediately. Cryptosphere says, I got one question on Flexnet site. It says the first round of NFTs cost 50. I had to pay about 65. Yeah, so the site was made when the ETH price was like at the very lows. And so the ETH, because it's all denominated in ETH, right? It's 0.0369 ETH. So at the time, that was about $50. But then the ETH price has gone up since then. So on the recent push to the site, I actually made it more reflective of what that dollar value is. But that was just using a hard-coded number on the site when the price of the unit that the sale is made in changed. So FlexDex, we've got the special LPs for FlexUSD, FlexE, FlexHEX, Layer Speed, regular V2 LPs. Yeah. So, yeah. So I've already talked to one of the dexes on Pulse Chain. Suggested that they want to deploy here. And there's going to be the FlexDex LPs. That's kind of a specific thing. And then, yeah, there's going to be all types of liquidity pools. And so the more ones where it's Flex paired with something, really the more HEX that just gets absorbed in those liquidity pools. And especially if like it's done in a way that burns liquidity, that alone could be a big source of effective buy and burn. Because if those coins just stay in the liquidity pools forever, they're effectively burnt. So that is a big piece of the success. Have looked into ERC 404. Remember last year? When we have created deep liquid markets, you can create 100 shares from one NFT. The yield from the platform goes to NFT. You create tradable yield bonds. It's a good idea. We should talk about how to build it on FlexNet. Let's look at some charts and I'll explain what I mean by the overhead supply, like the overhead on HEX getting basically ported over to, let's find HEX. Probably this one is a fine one to look at. Yeah. Let's do a multi-chart so we can actually, so X. Yeah, so this one. And let's add wrap pulse. And then we'll add pulse X. So let's share this tab. So this is what I mean. So I guess this doesn't show the full price chart. This is like a more recent pool. But I mean, HEX ran up all the way up here. And so like what would normally be like a major source of overhead resistance that was generated here, meaning like if price were to revisit this level, it would be really hard to come there. All of these buyers up here, basically, they were buying in order to convert that into Pulse X or Pulse and Pulse X. And they did that at a flat rate of about 0.001. And so there's really big overhead resistance on these charts that is basically lives right there. And so like every time price is like inched above it, it's just gotten beaten right back down, like inched up, beaten back down. And this was at a time when RH was subsidizing price. Like he was the main buyer in this setting, in this puck here. So like there's major overhead resistance there. Same on this chart at this level. Here you see it really clear. So that overhead resistance, it's like it transmogrified into another asset. And now it lives as resistance over here. And then, so resistance is never just a level, it's always like a big range. So there's just like a big range of this like overhead sell pressure because everyone got their paper value of HEX honored to convert into Pulse and PulseX. But one, that didn't introduce any liquidity into these markets. I mean, none of the a tiny amount maybe in market buys right here, and maybe whatever incremental amount was introduced, but the majority was actually rotated to ETH at the top. But so usually like when actual market structure takes place, what that means is that like new buyers are coming in. When they buy, some of their coins are left behind there in the liquidity pool, and then supply is removed from the pool. And then prices going up and down. When new sellers come in, they're selling into the liquidity pool and removing those coins, and so it forms some structure. And HEX, I mean, this chart doesn't show it because this is this pool started in May of 2021. But if you look at the all-time chart, there's full-on market structure everywhere in HEX, and so and even through these, like you see the structure forming with these. Anytime price turns around, basically is like a source of market structure. So HEX has this market structure to build on top of, which the other ones just really don't have. And this one, HEX ported all of its sell, like what would be resistance, just ported those to these markets. And these ones didn't have price discovery that took them to 0.0001. That was just the starting price. And so like that's the core reason why I'm not relying on anything related to Pulse Chain to be the driver of success here. And really the only thing that benefited from that massively is partially HEX on Pulse Chain, but still that's highly tied to this stuff. But HEX on Ethereum is kind of like, it's almost like it's been relieved of this big burden of just poor launch economics of Pulse Chain. And that really unleashes it up, where once price gets moving, like it's not going to be like normal, like market structure where like prior all-time high is a major source of resistance. It's like it may just burst through. It's really the only coin that's in position to do that, especially being so close to the Ethereum on-ramps. So pretty powerful stuff with HEX on Ethereum. And that's like people kind of get upset about this, but it's like, I'm not like casting my opinion or saying like, oh, Richard's going to do this once ETH reaches a certain level. I'm really just describing what has already happened. Like, it's not like I'm like suggesting, like hand wavy, suggesting that, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. Like, not at all. Like, this is like pure economic analysis of the situation. That makes, it puts us in a situation where really the only source of success, I think, in this upcoming cycle really can be HEX on Ethereum. So I'm willing to go out on a limb and make it happen. Go back to flexnet, and then I'm going to hop off here. So testnet starts in a couple days on Monday. So the price of these units is going to ratchet up. So started at 50, but just the ETH price went up in that time. So it's really 0.369 ETH per unit. So you can lock in, you can buy as many as you want. You can buy one. These are non-transferable NFTs. They earn from 4 different revenue sources: sequencer fees, FlexDex LP fees, exposure to incubator projects, and fundraising bonuses. Fundraising is a big deal. Like, that's kind of what makes this a blockchain successful. And so we're kind of starting out by just letting the community get involved. But then over time, we will always be raising. We kind of outlined that. Where is that? There we go. We kind of outlined that here. One of the 4 core pieces of the strategy is capital formation. Big budget, increased chance of success. Always be closing. Basically, going to be in fundraising mode basically all the time. And not only for the capital, but you want high impact people who have skin in the game. And so the goal is to finish each year with a larger budget than the start of the year. So, we of course wanted the community to be able to get involved first. It's kind of different in a lot of cases. Like, the VCs will get involved first, and they'll get artificially low prices. But in this situation, we want the people who've been grinding it out with us in this ecosystem to be able to get in at the starter rate. And then every time there's like a markup in a new fundraising event, then there's going to be fundraising bonuses. And part of that is because these NFTs are illiquid, like you can't transfer them. And so to be able to let people kind of experience gains from fundraising at higher valuations, the fundraising bonus is a key piece of it. There will be 100,000 units max possible, 10,000 available in each of these kind of launch rounds. And then at some point they will convert to a liquid token. But I just, to drive full alignment with the ownership unit holders and the network, I think it's better for it to not be something that's now competing for mind share and competing for liquidity with other users. And it puts them in a situation where the more successful these are, probably the 2 main drivers are going to be FlexDex LP fees, followed by even maybe the fundraising bonuses. It all depends. Like, total network volume is based on sequencers. Gas fees are quite low, so like it takes a lot of volume to add up. It's a big sequencer fee. But fundraising bonuses, like, that can happen in a big way, especially if like we close on some larger and larger investors. But then also the LP fees for liquidity, like basically this is like exposure to all tokens launched on FlexDex. And I recommend reading about FlexDex here. Really, like, this is a big innovation in itself. Like, even if the FlexNet wasn't a thing, FlexDex is worth pursuing. So I recommend you look into it here. Hope you guys can get involved here. 4 different income streams, get these awesome ownership unit NFTs, and you can become a co-owner of the FlexNet ecosystem by purchasing ownership units, flexnet.tech / ownership. And that's how we're going to get it done. So I'm going to hop off here. I hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, everybody.